ISIL's leaders are determined to strike the U.S. homeland, beyond inspiring homegrown violent extremist attacks. Although the U.S. is a much harder target than Europe, ISIL external operations remain a critical factor in our threat assessments for 2016.
That's James Clapper. He's the Director of National Intelligence, and Clapper is worried that ISIS will try and attack the U.S. this year, and not all of those threats are from outside the country. Well, a new book by best-selling author and journalist Peter Bergen details the homegrown threat that we are facing stateside. It's called United States of Jihad, and a short time ago, I spoke with Bergen. In putting this book together, I know you studied who fit the profile of someone charged with a domestic jihadist crime here. I know the public will be surprised, but I'm curious if you yourself were, that there was no convenient demo or profile that would make this up. These people came from all different walks of life and different ethnicities, different backgrounds. It's a little disconcerting, but at the same time illuminating.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, a variety of ethnic groups. I mean, particularly we've seen with ISIS, I'll give you a couple of examples. A 20-year-old female from Alabama who joined the group, a African-American in his early 30s who joined the group, who grew up in Minnesota. So we're seeing, kind of a mix of people. We created a database for my book of about 300 plus cases, and on average we found that anybody since 9/11 who's been charged or convicted of some kind of jihadi terrorist crime, ranging from the minor, sending small sums of money to a terrorist group, or to the major, murdering someone, we found that the profile is average age 29, a third are married, a third have kids, as well educated as most Americans, and so the average profile is really the average profile of the average American.
Let me give a couple examples, and I know no one case obviously fits the rule as you just explained, but if you can talk about the arc. One from our neck of the woods, Samir Khan, a Long Island teen. Talk about how a young kid who, as you say in the book, was more interested in girls and music, and then all of a sudden turns out to be a very influential blogger here, preaching jihadism and extremism across the globe.
Yeah, Samir Khan grew up in Long Island and was an otherwise normal kid in his early teen years, and he attended some kind of Islamic summer camp, and this prompted him to turn to fundamentalism. On 9/11, he told his high school classmates in Long Island, he attended a public school in Westbury, Long Island, that that American foreign policy was to blame. Obviously, that didn't go down very well with his classmates. His family then moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, where he set up the first English-language jihadi website and began attracting a fair amount of attention, both from journalists and the FBI. He then decided to go to Yemen, where he founded Al-Qaeda's first English-language magazine called Inspire, which turned out to be very influential, unfortunately. The Boston Marathon bombers read recipes for bombs, which they partly relied on for the bombs that killed 3 people at the Boston Marathon in, over 3 years ago. And Samir Khan eventually was killed in a CIA drone strike, and that ended his career as a sort of English-language jihadi kind of propagandist. But it shows, that Americans have played a bigger role in these groups than I think most people watching this program probably assume. Americans were at the founding of Al-Qaeda's first meeting back in 1988 and have continued to play leadership roles in these groups from time to time.
Well, you saw what the FBI director said, where he said that basically domestic security is compromised because of internet privacy and the limits that agencies can go to gather. What would you say to that?
Well, there's a big fight between 2 major American institutions here, which is the FBI, the Department of Justice, who want to have a so-called backdoor into internet communications. And then, of course, American tech companies think that putting a backdoor into their products means that they're not encrypted and that they're selling a sort of essentially a defective product, because as soon as you put a backdoor into something, it's not only the government who can get in, but other people. But I think the whole argument to some degree is moot, because ISIS now is using applications, for instance, such as Telegram, and Telegram is based in Berlin, and it's not a Germany, it's not an American company, it's a German company. So it doesn't, even if in the unlikely event that every American tech companies said, yeah, you're right, we're going to build backdoors into these encrypted in communications in a way that horse has already left the stable, because ISIS is not using American tech to do many of its social media platform propaganda.
You know, there's a poll that you reference in your book that we've also talked about, and certainly it's come up in the election, where 4 in 5 Americans believe that a major terror plot in the U.S., an attack, is likely. You say you got to give that some perspective, in that since 9/11, more people on American soil have been killed by, let's say, right-wing extremists than have been through acts of terror. I think that number would surprise a lot of folks who think the problem's far more endemic than maybe the math suggests it is.
Well, you know, there's 45 Americans who've been killed by jihadi terrorists since 9/11 in the United States. And if we'd been having this discussion in 2002, and one of your guests predicted that, you know, a decade and a half after 9/11, that 45 people would have been killed in the United States by jihadi terrorists at the time, that would have seemed a ludicrously optimistic assessment. I mean, we were concerned about another 9/11 or, you know, Al-Qaeda attacking again. And in fact, the United States government, both under the Bush administration and the Obama administration, has put up a lot of defenses that make it very hard for groups outside the United States to attack the United States. There were, on 9/11, there were 16 people on the no-fly list. Now there are 47,000, and there are a whole raft of other statistics I could give you, which show that we've created pretty good defenses. And that one of the reasons I wrote the book is the defenses keep foreign terrorists out, but they don't deal with Americans radicalizing here in the homeland. You know, and that is being generated by people reading stuff on the internet, and that is often very hard to stop because people are radicalizing in their basements. They're not going overseas to get training. They're not meeting with other similarly like-minded radicalized individuals. They're just doing it online, and that's a hard thing to stop.
You say, from talking to experts, people are less concerned about a 9/11 style attack and more about lone wolves, right?
Well, I mean, you know, the facts speak for themselves. I mean, every single lethal terrorist attack since 9/11 has been carried out by a lone wolf or a pair of lone wolves, whether it was the brothers in Boston who had no connection to a foreign terrorist organization, or whether it was the couple in San Bernardino who had no connection to a foreign terrorist organization except pledging allegiance to ISIS, but they had no actual real connection with ISIS, or whether it was Major Nidal Hassan in Fort Hood, Texas, who killed 13 people. He had no connection, no formal connection, no training from a foreign terrorist organization. All these people I've just mentioned radicalized here in the United States.
The book, again, is United States of Jihad. Peter Bergen, the author. Peter, thanks again for a few. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Up next are Hudson Valley headlines. Please stay with us.